All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some fascinating material on interview questions for Security Operations Center
Yeah.
analysts.
SOC Analyst, yeah.
SOC analysts, exactly.
Right.
And our mission is to really kind of look past those canned responses, right? And really see what these questions tell us about what the work really involves, what you need to know.
Absolutely.
So think of this as your guide. Whether you're considering a career in cybersecurity, you're just curious about how companies stay safe, or you just want to know what goes on behind the scenes.
I love that.
A peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So you've given me some great material that outlines some common interview questions.
Right.
We've got expected answers and even real-world scenarios.
Yeah. Trying to make it as practical as possible.
Exactly. Now, we're not just going to go through the motions of questions and answers, though.
Oh.
We're going to really delve into the practical implications, the critical thinking, and the stuff that it takes to truly excel in this role.
Yeah, those aha moments.
Yeah, those aha moments.
Or things really click and make sense.
Exactly. How do we identify threats?
Right.
How do we respond to them in the real world?
Right.
And what's the mindset you need?
Absolutely the crucial mindset.
Okay, so let's start with kind of the very first thing. What is the role of a SOC analyst? You see these kind of standard answers: monitoring, detecting, investigating, responding. But I want to take a step back and ask, why are these things so fundamental to security?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So when we think about monitoring, it's really about understanding what is normal.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you can see what's abnormal.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the detection comes in. You're looking for those deviations from the baseline.
The anomalies, the red flags.
Exactly. And sometimes it's those subtle things that are the early indicators,
Yeah. Interesting.
right, of a potential attack.
So it's not just sitting there staring at a screen.
No, not at all.
It's about really understanding the patterns, the ebb and flow.
Absolutely. It's about having that deeper understanding of the environment.
And then the investigation comes in. You don't just see something weird and stop there.
Right.
You've got to dig deeper.
Exactly. Is it a glitch? Is it a real threat? What's the scope? What's going on?
So it's almost like detective work.
It is. It really is.
You're piecing the clues together.
Putting a puzzle together.
And then finally the response.
Right.
That's where the action is.
Yes.
Contain it, minimize the damage, and ultimately get rid of it.
Right. The containment, eradication, and recovery.
It's a whole life cycle.
Absolutely. And each stage is connected.
You can't have a good response without good detection and good investigation.
Exactly. Can't have one without the other.
Now, your material gave this great real-world example. Multiple failed login attempts from, like, unusual geographic locations. What's going through the SOC analyst's head when they see this? How do they know if it's, like, a brute force attack or just someone who's, I don't know, on vacation and forgot their password?
Right. It could be something as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, the first thought might be, oh, is someone trying to break in? But a good analyst doesn't jump to conclusions.
Right.
They're going to look at how many attempts, how often are they happening, where are they coming from?
The context, the patterns.
Exactly. And they'll compare that to the user's usual activity.
So if the user is, like, normally logging in from New York City and suddenly there are attempts from, like, Russia and China,
That's a red flag.
that raises an eyebrow.
Absolutely.
But what if they just told HR they were going on a trip to Thailand?
Right. That's where verification is so important.
So you might check with HR, see if there's a travel record.
Exactly. Or maybe they requested a password reset recently.
Oh, right. That would explain some failed attempts.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about having that full picture, not just reacting to one little blip on the radar.
Absolutely. Context is king.
So let's move on to how suspicious activity is actually spotted within, like, a SIEM, a security information and event management system.
Right.
Your material outlines a 5-step process: analyze, verify, investigate, respond, and document. Why is each of those steps so important? What happens if you skip one or, like, rush through it?
Well, think of the SOM as the central nervous system for security data. It's pulling in logs from firewalls, intrusion detection systems, even email servers.
So it's like the central hub for all the security information.
Exactly. So when an alert pops up, The analysis phase is all about examining that raw data, those initial clues.
Okay, so you're looking at the evidence, the digital fingerprint.
Precisely. Then verifications like double-checking. Is this alert actually a problem, or is it just a false alarm?
A false positive, right.
Exactly.
We'll get into those later.
Yes, those are important.
So you're making sure you're not chasing ghosts.
Right. Then the investigation really digs deeper. You're looking at related events, gathering more information to paint a clearer picture.
So it's like connecting the dots, building a narrative.
Exactly. And based on what you find, that's where the response comes in. Blocking an IP address, isolating a compromised system, taking action.
So you're taking the appropriate steps based on your investigation.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And finally, documentation. This is crucial.
Why is that?
Because you need to record what happened, what you did, what you learned.
So you can learn from it and improve.
Exactly. It helps with future incidents, and it's often required for compliance purposes as well.
So if you skip verification, you might waste a ton of time on something that's not even a real threat.
Absolutely.
And if you don't document properly, you lose those valuable lessons learned.
Exactly. Rushing any of these steps can lead to misdiagnosis, ineffective solutions, and you miss out on that continuous improvement cycle.
Right, so every step has its purpose. Now, the material had this interesting example of anomalous logins outside of work hours that turned out to be a legitimate user who was just traveling.
Right. Different time zone.
Exactly, highlighting the importance of that verification step. So what are some things an analyst might do to verify an alert like that?
Well, one of the first things might be to try and contact the user directly.
Oh, right, make sure they're actually the ones logging in.
Exactly. But through a known secure channel, not their potentially compromised email.
Makes sense.
They could also check if there's any record of approved travel, maybe in the company's HR system.
Or like a travel booking system.
Right. They could also look at the user's login history, see if there's any pattern of travel or unusual activity.
So building that context again.
Absolutely. And sometimes even a quick glance at public information like their LinkedIn profile might offer clues, though that's less formal.
Right, right. So it's about using all the tools at your disposal. Now, let's talk about something that I know can be a real pain. False positives and false negatives.
Oh, yes.
We've got the definitions. A false positive is an alert that looks like a threat, but isn't.
Right.
And a false negative is a real attack that slips through the cracks. Why are both of these such a problem?
Well, both can really undermine your security. False positives lead to what we call alert fatigue.
Alert fatigue.
Yeah, you're constantly investigating things that turn out to be nothing.
So you get desensitized.
Exactly. You start ignoring the alarms.
Yeah.
And that's when a real attack can slip through.
It's like the boy who cried wolf.
Exactly.
And false negatives.
Those are even more dangerous because an actual attack is happening, but nobody knows.
So the damage could be pretty bad by the time you figure it out.
Absolutely. You could have data theft, system compromise, malware spreading silently.
Yikes.
The consequences can be huge: financial losses, damage to reputation, legal issues.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It really is.
We've got these examples here. A remote desktop connection flagged as unauthorized, that's a false positive.
Right.
And a phishing email getting past the filters, that's the false negative.
Mm-hmm.
In the real world, what would the impact of each of these be, and how do you try to minimize both?
Okay, so with that remote desktop false positive, the immediate impact might be the analyst wasting time investigating it, maybe disrupting the legitimate user.
Right, okay.
But the bigger danger is that if this happens a lot, the team might start lowering the sensitivity of the rule.
Do avoid those false alarms.
Exactly. But then they might miss a real attack later on.
Oh, that's a tough balance.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, with the phishing email, the consequences could be much worse.
Because someone might actually click on it.
Right, leading to malware, stolen credentials, a full-blown network compromise.
So how do you prevent both of these?
It's an ongoing process. You
Oh.
constantly fine-tune your tools, use up-to-date threat intelligence, and educate users to be more aware.
It's a constant cat and mouse game.
It really is a continuous cycle of learning and adapting.
Okay, so let's say an analyst sees an alert. How do they actually know if it's the real deal or just another false alarm? What do they look at?
Well, the material highlights analyzing logs, using threat intelligence, and looking at historical patterns. And the key is you can't just rely on one of these.
They all work together.
Right. Logs give you the details of what happened, but they might not tell you the why or the who.
So the logs are like the raw data, but you need more context.
Exactly. That's where threat intelligence comes in. It tells you about known attackers, malware, and attack methods.
So you can see if this alert matches any known threats.
Right. And then historical patterns tell you what's normal for your specific organization.
So you can spot anything out of the ordinary.
Precisely.
So you might see a spike in login failures from a country you don't usually do business with.
Right.
That's suspicious on its own.
It is.
But then you check your threat intelligence and see that this country is known for brute force attacks. And you confirm that the user hasn't been traveling.
Right. Now it's starting to look more serious.
The pieces of the puzzle are coming together.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots.
The example they gave was a PowerShell execution.
Yeah, a tricky one.
Because it could be legitimate, right?
Absolutely. An admin might use it for routine tasks.
But it could also be an attacker running a malicious script.
Right.
So what are they looking for in the logs to figure that out?
Well, they'll look at what triggered the PowerShell execution. Was it a normal application or something suspicious?
So following the chain of events.
Exactly. Then they'll look at the actual commands that were run. Are they normal admin commands or something more malicious?
Are they trying to, like, steal data or gain access to other systems?
Right. They might also look at the user account. Does it have the right privileges for those actions?
So if it's a regular user running powerful commands, that's a red flag.
Absolutely. And critically, are there any unusual network connections? Is it talking to known bad IP addresses or domains?
So you're looking for any signs that it's reaching out to, like a command and control server.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about domain impersonation.
Right.
What makes this attack so effective?
It preys on human psychology.
Okay.
Attackers know that people often don't pay close attention to email addresses or website URLs.
We're all busy, we skim things.
Exactly. So a tiny typo, like an extra letter or a slightly different character, can easily slip by.
Like paypal.com instead of paypal.com.
Exactly.
Oh, wow, I see how that could be tricky.
And it plays on trust. If it looks like a familiar domain, you're more likely to click without thinking.
So it's not about hacking the technology, it's hacking the human.
Right.
The material mentions a few ways to detect this: monitoring for lookalike domains, DNS security tools, and email authentication protocols like SPF, DKIM, and DMRC. Can you break those down a bit?
Sure. Monitoring for lookalike domains means actively scanning for newly registered domains that are very similar to yours.
So you're trying to catch them early before they can do any damage.
Exactly. DNS security tools can help block access to known malicious domains and detect suspicious DNS queries.
So those are more preventative measures.
Right. And email authentication protocols, those are all about verifying that an email is actually from who it claims to be.
So making sure it's not a spoofed email.
Exactly.
They gave that paypal.com example. What are some things people might miss, and how does an analyst catch this kind of thing?
They might miss small spelling errors, extra hyphens, or different top-level domains like .org instead of .com.
So it's really subtle stuff.
It can be. But the analysts, they're using those domain monitoring tools to spot these lookalike domains as soon as they pop up.
So they're proactively looking for them.
Exactly. Then they investigate to see if it's being used for phishing or other malicious activities.
If it is, what do they do?
They block access to the domain, warn users about it, and might even work to get the domain taken down.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It has to be.
Let's shift gears and talk about correlation rules in a SIEM. What's the main idea behind these, and why is combining events more powerful than just looking at individual alerts?
The basic idea is to find patterns and connections between events that might seem unrelated at first glance.
Okay.
Instead of just seeing one failed login, you might have a rule that looks for multiple failed logins from different locations, followed by a successful login from a new IP address.
So individually, those events might not be that alarming.
Right.
But together, they paint a different picture.
Exactly. It suggests a compromised account.
And that's what makes correlation rules so powerful.
Right. They can help you detect those multi-stage attacks that fly under the radar.
They gave the example of someone logging in from India and then the USA just minutes later.
Yeah.
Physically impossible.
What are some other examples of seemingly unrelated events that, when combined, scream security breach?
Oh, there are lots. Like a user accessing sensitive files for the first time ever, then a huge amount of data being downloaded from their machine.
That's suspicious. Very. Or a login to a critical server outside of business hours, followed by new admin accounts being created.
Oh, that's a bad sign.
It is. Or multiple weird network connections from a computer that just triggered a malware alert.
So it's about connecting those dots to see the bigger picture.
Exactly, the bigger picture.
Okay, let's talk about something nobody wants to deal with. A ransomware attack.
Right.
The material outlines these crucial steps. Isolate, identify, restore, analyze, and enhance. Why is isolating the infected systems the very first thing you do?
Because ransomware is designed to spread like wildfire. It wants to encrypt everything it can.
So you've got to contain it.
Absolutely. By isolating the infected system, you stop it from reaching other machines and limit the damage.
Like a digital quarantine.
Exactly.
Then you identify the specific strain of ransomware. Why is that so important?
Because it tells you about the attacker, their methods, their tools.
So you know what you're dealing with.
Right. And it lets you use threat intelligence databases.
To see if there are any known vulnerabilities or decryption tools.
Exactly.
And they emphasized restoring from backups instead of paying the ransom. Why is that?
Because paying the ransom is risky. There's no guarantee you'll get the decryption key.
They might just take your money and run.
They might. Plus, it encourages them to attack others and could even have legal consequences.
So restoring from backups is the safer and more reliable option.
It really is.
They had that example of a healthcare company getting hit with ransomware after an employee clicked a bad link.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other common ways ransomware gets in, and how do you protect against it?
Phishing emails, like in that example, are a huge one.
People clicking on things they shouldn't.
Right. Then there are exploits, taking advantage of software vulnerabilities, especially if systems aren't patched.
So keeping your software up to date is critical.
Absolutely. And compromised RDP connections are another way in.
RDP?
Remote Desktop Protocol.
Oh, right, for remote access.
Exactly.
So how do you protect against all this?
Multiple layers of security. Strong email filters. Security awareness training for employees. Patching. Strong passwords. Multi-factor authentication. Limiting RDP access. And most importantly, backups.
It's a holistic approach.
It has to be.
Okay, last question. Imagine a SOC analyst on a crazy busy day with tons of alerts coming in.
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
How do they prioritize all of that?
The material mentions a triage system with categories like critical, medium, and low.
Right, right.
The priority depends on the potential impact and how urgent the threat is.
Okay.
Critical incidents are like a confirmed breach, ransomware spreading, or denial of service attack taking down systems.
Yeah.
Those need immediate attention.
Drop everything and deal with it now.
Right. Medium risk alerts might be suspicious logins, unusual network activity, or policy violations.
Those need investigation, but maybe not right this second.
Right. And low priority alerts are more informational and can be monitored, but don't usually need immediate action.
So it's all about assessing the risk and prioritizing accordingly. They gave the example of a ransomware outbreak versus a single failed login attempt.
Yeah, no contest there.
Pretty clear which one takes priority. What would immediately make an alert critical?
A few things. Confirmation of a successful intrusion, ransomware activity, data being stolen, alerts affecting critical systems or sensitive data, or signs of a widespread compromise.
So anything that screams major problem.
Right. Anything that could cause serious damage to the organization.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've really gone deep into what it takes to be a SOC analyst.
A fascinating role.
It is. The constant monitoring, the detective work of detection and investigation, and then the decisive action of responding to threats.
And the critical thinking that underlies all of it.
Exactly. You have to be on your toes, thinking strategically, and always ready for the unexpected.
Adaptability is key.
Absolutely. So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Given how cyber threats are always evolving, how do you think the role of a SOC analyst will change in the future? What new skills or knowledge will they need?
That's a great question.
It's a field that's constantly changing, and understanding the fundamentals is just the beginning.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious.
And stay secure.